Imagine coming home from vacation, only to find your property fenced off, your driveway demolished, and a stranger demanding you pay rent to live in your own house. No warnings, no laws, just a self-declared HOA president with fake cops, forged documents, and a plan to steal everything you own. I wasn't part of their neighborhood, but they tried to take my home anyway. That's when I decided to fight back and take them down. I still remember the day I signed the papers for my house like it happened yesterday. Nestled at the edge of a quiet South African suburb, it wasn't just a house. It was freedom. No neighbors breathing down my neck. No overbearing regulations. Just a slice of land I could truly call mine. I bought the property during a transitional phase in the area. Old houses being sold off, new developments springing up, but no formal homeowner association in sight. That's what made the place so attractive to me. I wanted space, autonomy, privacy. The first year was paradise. I planted a lemon tree in the backyard, installed solar panels, painted the fence burnt orange because, well, I could. I worked in the city, commuted back to my quiet fortress every evening, and basked in the peace I had carved out for myself. My neighbors were a mix of young families and retirees, all friendly, mostly private. We'd nod hello and get on with our lives. No drama. At least not yet. I started noticing subtle changes about 18 months after I moved in. It began with a new development across the main road, rows of tightly packed homes with identical bay facades and pristine lawns. One morning on my way to work, I saw a large banner fluttering above the development gate, now welcoming residents to Clear Ridge Community, a secure HOA-governed suburb. The name sounded like something out of a dystopian novel. I chuckled at the idea of joining an HOA. Why would anyone voluntarily hand over control of their lives to strangers? I figured I was safe. My home was older, outside the new developments, with separate zoning. I wasn't part of their game, and that suited me just fine. But things didn't stay contained. 6 months later, a sleek black SUV started making slow rounds through our street. Every morning, like clockwork. At first, I thought it belonged to someone's visiting family member. Then I noticed the driver always wore the same outfit. Navy slacks, a matching vest, a white dress shirt buttoned up to his neck, and sunglasses, even in the rain. He never smiled, never waved. He just watched. Then came the pamphlets. Folded, glossy pages started appearing in everyone's mailboxes. Clear Ridge HOA, expanding our community boundaries, protecting property values, ensuring safety. There was a map on the back. My home was suddenly inside a red dotted line labeled Proposed HOA Annexation Zone. That was the first time I felt the chill. It was a Saturday when the president came knocking. I was in the middle of repainting my garage door, music blasting from a speaker on the driveway, when a shadow crossed the concrete. I turned and saw him. Slick back hair, gold watch glinting in the sun, clipboard in hand. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't offer a handshake. "I'm here to have a chat about your property," he said flatly. I paused the music. "I don't recall inviting you." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've probably seen our updates. As of last month, Clear Ridge HOA has expanded its jurisdiction. Your property now falls under our governance." I blinked. "I don't think so. My deed doesn't mention any HOA. My house predates your development." He looked at his clipboard, tapping it. "That may be true, but the city approved our expansion. You've been in violation of several codes, non-standard paint colors, unapproved exterior modifications, solar panel installation without community consent." I nearly laughed. "You're not serious." He raised a brow. "I've let things slide so far. Consider it a courtesy. But going forward, we expect compliance." "Let me make something clear," I said, stepping forward. "I didn't sign up for your HOA, and I have no intention of following your made-up rules. Unless there's a legal change to my property title, we're done here." His gaze hardened. "You should reconsider. It's easier to join than fight." I leaned in. "And I suggest you never show up here again." He smiled again, and this time it was something colder. "Enjoy your weekend." He turned and walked away, as if he hadn't just delivered a threat wrapped in a suit. That night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. digging through municipal records. I double-checked my property deed, zoning maps, even the city's online database. Nothing had changed. No annexation. No HOA jurisdiction. I wasn't crazy, but I also wasn't naive. I printed everything, photocopied my deed, snapped pictures of property lines. I filed a quiet complaint with the city, just in case. I even bought a home security camera and installed it under the eaves of the garage, pointing toward the street. I wasn't expecting anything immediate, but something told me this wasn't over. Days passed and a week. Nothing. No SUV. No flyers. No shady smiles. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd gotten the message. Then, 2 weeks later, I received a letter in a thick envelope. No return address. The HOA seal embossed in silver on the corner. Inside was a formal violation notice for excessive noise, improper landscaping, and unauthorized residential upgrades, followed by an invoice for a $9,200 in fines. It was addressed to Clear Ridge homeowner. Not even my name. I shredded it and went back to my life. But somewhere deep inside, I knew I'd just stepped onto a battlefield. 2 months later, I booked a trip to Cape Town, a well-earned vacation after wrapping up a massive work project. 2 weeks. Sunday sand. Silence. I notified my neighbors, set my security camera to motion alert mode, and made sure my alarm system was fully armed. I even left a light on in the hallway, hoping it'd dissuade any mischief. The flight was perfect. The Airbnb overlooked the ocean. I didn't check my email for 3 days straight. For the first time in months, I actually relaxed. Until the morning, I flew back. As the cab turned down my street, something looked off. My driveway was blocked. A black iron fence had been installed, 8 feet high, topped with curled spikes, running the full perimeter of my property. At the center stood a heavy gate with a glowing red keypad. My house was still there, but it looked like a crime scene. Or worse, a prison. I stumbled out of the cab, dragging my suitcase behind me, and tried the keypad. No reaction. I circled the fence, looking for a brake or a latch. Nothing. And then, as if summoned by my confusion, the SUV pulled up. The window rolled down slowly. There was same smug expression, same sunglasses. "Welcome back," he said. "What the hell is this?" "New security measures. We couldn't risk more violations. You've ignored every notice, every fine. I don't belong to your damn HOA." He held up a document. "As of April 1st, your land is under annexation clause 3B of the revised Clear Ridge Charter. We've seized the property due to non-compliance. You have 2 options: pay rent to the HOA or vacate the premises. You're out of your mind." He didn't blink. "Your access code will be granted upon first rent payment. Until then, please refrain from trespassing." The SUV rolled away as I stood there, stunned, locked out of my own home. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I'd feel safe in my own neighborhood. I stood outside my own house, a suitcase in one hand and rage in the other. The sun had dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the fence, now encaging my property. It was as if my home had been annexed by a foreign government overnight. Except this wasn't a government. This was a private citizen with a god complex and a fake badge. I yanked on the iron gate again, but it didn't budge. The glowing red keypad blinked at me like a warning light. The president's SUV had already vanished down the street. My neighbors? They watched from behind curtains, some peeking through blinds, others pretending not to see. It was clear to me now. I wasn't just being locked out. I was being made an example. I spent the next 2 hours walking the perimeter, looking for weaknesses. The fence was seamless, bolted deep into the concrete. Security cameras had been mounted at each corner, pointed directly at my front door, my driveway, my windows. No legal papers had been served. No court order. No police. Just a man with money and muscle, executing as though behind a wall of fake authority. But what broke me wasn't the fence. It was the silence. The realization that nobody was coming to help me. I walked a nearby park, sat on a bench, and tried to breathe. Then I pulled out my phone and started documenting everything. Photos, videos, voice memos, a record. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. The next morning, I returned to my gate with bolt cutters in hand. I had no plan, just raw fury and a need to reclaim what was mine. But as I approached, a voice crackled from a speaker mounted on a post near the gate. Step away from the fence. I froze. A large man emerged from the alley beside my house, broad-shouldered, bald, and wearing a navy blue uniform that said Clear Ridge Enforcement. He wasn't a cop, not even close, but the pistol holstered at his hip told a different story to anyone watching. "Are you trespassing today?" he asked calmly, cracking his knuckles. "This is my house." I snapped. "Not according to our records," he replied. "And you're about 5 seconds away from criminal charges." He pulled out a walkie-talkie and pressed a button. "Unit 1, trespasser is attempting forced entry." My blood ran cold. I backed away slowly, lifting both hands. "I'm leaving, but this is far from over." His expression didn't change. He didn't blink, just stood there, still as a statue, until I disappeared down the block. I filed a police report that afternoon. It went nowhere. The officer at the desk barely listened, flipping through paperwork as I explained what happened. "Sounds like a civil matter," he said. "You're telling me someone can fence off my property and charge me rent, and you call that civil? If they have documents and no court has ruled otherwise, there's not much we can do." I left with a pit in my stomach. They had fake authority, and now, the silence of real ones. By the third day, letters started piling up in my temporary mailbox at a rented P.O. box downtown. Violation notices, penalty statements, fee warnings. Each envelope bore the Clear Ridge seal in embossed silver. Inside were thick papers with official-looking headers, listing offenses I hadn't committed. Unauthorized presence on HOA property are 500. Trespassing after hours are 800. Failure to comply with community codes are 200. The fines escalated each time I entered my own yard. I had nowhere to go but forward. At night, I started sneaking in, climbing the fence behind my property with gloves and a backpack. It felt surreal, like I was burglarizing my own life. I avoided security patrols, slipped past cameras, and showered quickly before crawling back out through a neighbor's forgotten drainage trench. But the fear lingered. I was living like a fugitive. Every morning, I awoke outside my home, felt like another notch on their scoreboard. I received voicemails from block numbers, robotic voices threatening civil escalation. Some neighbors stopped talking to me. Others avoided eye contact altogether. I wasn't just isolated. I was being erased. Then the utilities died. It was a Tuesday. I had just brewed a cup of instant coffee and opened my laptop when the power blinked once, then vanished. Seconds later, the water taps gave a hissing cough and stopped. I tried flipping the breakers. Nothing. Called the utility companies. Waited on hold for an hour. Finally, someone answered. Their tone was cautious. "We were informed by the listed property authority that the home is scheduled for demolition," they said. All services were shut off under directive from Clear Ridge HOA. Who the hell gave them the right? "I'm sorry," they said. "You'll need to speak with your association representative." That night, I slept on the floor of a friend's apartment. My phone battery was dying. My anger wasn't. The next morning, I returned and found a laminated notice pinned to my garage door. Scheduled site clearance. Pending structure evaluation. They were trying to force me out. Not with bulldozers. With silence. Darkness. Hunger. I shouted into the camera mounted on my gate, daring them to face me. Instead, the HOA president appeared 30 minutes later with a smirk and 2 men in suits. "I could offer you a relocation allowance," he said. "Just sign a temporary lease, agree to vacate, and we'll talk compensation." I spat at his feet. His smile faded. "Then I suggest you move out before things get uglier." I walked away, fists clenched. They hadn't won. Not yet. I called my boss and explained everything. To my surprise, he didn't fire me. Instead, he said the one thing I didn't expect. get a lawyer, and take all the time you need. I drained my savings and hired a bulldog attorney, lean, bald, with eyes that looked like they could pierce concrete. He reviewed my case and gave me a simple summary. They're bluffing, but it's a damn good bluff. They've cut my power, my water. They locked me out. Paperwork can be manufactured, signatures forged, but the burden of proof lies with them. We start by tearing down their claims. He filed an emergency injunction, demanded all HOA documents through discovery, and simultaneously launched a financial probe. It wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about their empire. See, he explained, pointing to a highlighted clause in their bylaws. If they legally annex your home, it would reflect in municipal filings and in their budget. You think it's not there? I think they're stealing, and we're going to catch them with their hands deep in the cookie jar. Weeks passed, late nights blurred with early mornings. But slowly, evidence began to mount. Large withdrawals from HOA accounts, massive transfers with no listed purpose, funds going directly into private portfolios, stock market transactions on the Johannesburg Exchange. All of it illegal, all of it traceable. They're not just bullies, my lawyer said. They're thieves. The deeper my lawyer dug, the uglier it got. What started as a land dispute had morphed into something far more grotesque, a full-blown financial racket disguised as community governance. The HOA, under the iron grip of its smug president, wasn't just extorting homeowners. It was embezzling from them. We found discrepancies in annual dues reported to the city versus actual collections. Entire projects with hefty budgets were listed but never completed. Huge amounts of cash were vanishing into shell companies, then magically reappearing in personal accounts linked to board members. And the kicker? Large transfers were being funneled into speculative trades on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. This isn't just a corrupt HOA, my lawyer said one afternoon, slamming a binder shut. It's a laundering operation. He prepared a formal report for the court alongside our case file. I reviewed the documents late into the night, jaw clenched, chest burning with purpose. This wasn't about just me anymore. They weren't just fencing in homes. They were fencing in people's lives. That night, I walked to the end of my street and stared back at the iron cage around my home. They wanted me gone? I'd burn the whole machine down before I handed over the keys. 2 weeks later, we walked into court. The room smelled of paper and tension. The HOA's legal team showed up with smug smiles and briefcases lined with arrogance. But we had something they didn't. Proof. Emails. Transaction logs. Hand-signed memos authorizing illegal fund transfers. The judge listened, flipping through pages, occasionally glancing at the opposing counsel with a rising frown. After 45 minutes, she issued a cease and desist on the spot. The Clear Ridge HOA is hereby ordered to remove all unauthorized barriers and cease further obstruction of the plaintiff's property rights pending a full investigation, she said. It was a moment that should have felt like victory. I should have celebrated, cheered. Instead, I looked across the aisle at the HOA president and saw something worse than rage. Calm. He wasn't shaken. He wasn't afraid. He was planning. My gut churned as I left the courtroom, because a man who's losing but not angry is a man who still believes he's going to win. At dawn the next day, I returned to find the gate gone. The fence, too, as if it had never existed. It should have felt like the beginning of freedom. But there were new signs, ones harder to see, but impossible to ignore. Orange traffic cones appeared down the street, bright, plastic markers lining roads that didn't need repair. When I asked the city if there was scheduled construction, they confirmed there wasn't. Neighbors started whispering, some avoiding me altogether. Kids who used away from their yards were now being pulled inside when I walked by. The fake security guards didn't disappear. They just parked farther away, watching from inside blacked-out sedans. The HOA hadn't backed down. They'd simply changed tactics. One evening, I found a new flyer taped to my front door. This time it wasn't directed at me. It was for the neighbors. Residents are reminded not to engage with individuals under legal investigation or opposing Clear Ridge community guidelines. They were isolating me, not with fences, but with fear. And it was working. It was the shriek of jackhammers that woke me. Not distant, not down the street, right outside my bedroom window. I staggered to the front door and flung it open to find half my driveway reduced to rubble. Chunks of concrete littered the lawn, and a construction crew in neon vests worked without pause. The HOA president stood by the sidewalk, sipping a coffee. "What the hell is this?" I yelled. He turned calmly. "Community beautification. Your driveway was listed for upgrade. No charge. You're demolishing my property without consent." "Actually," he replied, pulling a folded document from his breast pocket, "this falls under the Shared Infrastructure Improvement Clause. We're well within our rights." I snatched the paper and scanned it. It was nonsense. Legalese packed into a wall of jargon. It referenced bylaws that didn't apply to non-HOA members like me. "You've lost in court." I snapped. "This won't hold up." He smiled. "Oh, I know, but it slows you down." I looked back at the ruins of my driveway, then at the workers who didn't even glance up. "Why?" I asked. He leaned in. "Because you're a splinter, and splinters infect." That night, I couldn't park in my own garage. The next morning, my tires were slashed. Coincidence? I didn't think so. The notice came folded in a thick manila envelope, dropped off in person by a courier wearing the same fake security badge I'd seen a dozen times. It was stamped in red ink. Notice of foreclosure. Imminent property auction. The claim? Delinquent HOA dues totaling over our $135,000, an amount billed from fake fines, rental fees, and penalties for illegal residency. They were officially treating me as a tenant in my own home, and now they were preparing to auction it off. But here's the twist. Attached to the document was a printed flyer for a Clear Ridge open house showcase, featuring photos of my kitchen, backyard, and living room. The HOA had listed my house online as a soon-to-be available premium rental unit. I was stunned, furious, but I was also ready. I walked into my lawyer's office and dropped the documents on his desk. "This is it," I said. "They've declared war." He opened the folder, scanned it, and grinned for the first time since we'd met. "Then let's give them one." The next move wasn't legal. It wasn't financial. It was human. I'd spent months fighting the HOA alone, and they loved that. They preyed on isolation, cornering, dividing, conquering. But what if I wasn't the only one? I started digging. It began with a quiet knock on a door 2 streets down. Then another. Then another. I brought copies of the foreclosure notice they sent me and screenshots of the fake rental listings. At first, people were hesitant, nervous eyes peering through chained doors. But then it started. One elderly couple showed me 3 letters from the HOA demanding payment for being non-participants in community safety patrols. Another single mother confessed she'd been fined her $15,000 for non-compliant curtain colors and had her car towed for overnight parking violations. Each house I visited added another layer to the madness, and the pattern was clear. Anyone who hadn't voluntarily joined the HOA was being harassed, fined, and intimidated, forced to comply or be run out. By the end of the week, I had 6 other homeowners who had experienced the same illegal annexation tactics. We met in my gutted living room, sat on camping chairs and overturned storage bins, drinking instant coffee and trading horror stories. One neighbor, a quiet accountant named Tarek, said it best. If they're willing to burn down our lives to build their empire, then it's time we light our own match. We filed a joint civil suit, one powerful enough to demand a class action status. The stakes had changed. This wasn't just about my house anymore. It was about taking down a monster. The press conference happened on a Wednesday morning, just outside the city courthouse. We didn't have a PR team or a podium. Just 7 people, 2 reporters, a bunch of legal files, and a shared goal: expose the Clear Ridge HOA for what it truly was. The first story came from Susan, a retired schoolteacher whose dog had been confiscated by fake animal control for barking too loudly during daylight hours. She told the cameras how the HOA charged her $3,000 for community distress. Then came Emmanuel, who recounted how his 6-year-old had been stopped by enforcers while riding a scooter, told that play equipment was prohibited on common paths. When my turn came, I stepped up with a thick folder in one hand and a photograph in the other. The photo showed my driveway in rubble. My name is Devin, and I was illegally locked out of my own home, fined for trespassing on my own property, and had my utilities shut off without due process. Then I held up the auction notice. This is how far they were willing to go. I didn't cry, but my voice cracked, and I could see it. Something shifting behind the cameras. People were listening. They were angry. By evening, the story was online. South African HOA accused of land grab, harassment, and fraud made headlines. Dozens of comments flooded the threads. People who'd never heard of Clear Ridge were now demanding justice. And the pressure had just begun. Within 48 hours, the city launched an emergency audit. We didn't need to wait for court. The forensic accounting teams began pulling records, cross-checking finances, and interviewing former employees of the HOA. That's when it truly unraveled. The president's lavish spending was undeniable. HOA dues used to pay for vacations, luxury cars, private security, and speculative investments on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Worse, several board members had falsified signatures, submitted fake ballots, and rerouted funds to a private shell account. And then the document shredders started humming. It was too late, because we had everything. Screenshots, testimonies, emails. The paper trail was ironclad. The arrest came 3 weeks later. I wasn't there when it happened, but someone from the press conference texted me a photo. The HOA president, in cuffs, being walked out his office by 2 city officers. His sunglasses were gone. His face? Pale, hollow, exposed. He was charged with embezzlement, harassment, criminal trespass, forgery, attempted fraud, misuse of public utilities. His bail was denied, and for the first time in a year, I slept through the night without waking up to look out the window. With their king toppled, the HOA imploded like a house of cards. The city froze all remaining HOA assets. Board members resigned. Those who didn't were forcibly removed by court order. The HOA's legal team, once so confident, quietly dropped out, citing conflict of interest. The court declared the Clear Ridge HOA a fraudulent organization and ordered it dissolved. Every home that had been illegally annexed, mine included, was scrubbed from their ledgers. Every fine and fabricated fee was invalidated. And then came the real justice, restitution. The president's assets were liquidated, his cars sold, bank accounts drained, and real estate seized. The stolen funds were returned to community in waves. Every homeowner wronged received compensation. I didn't become a millionaire, but I got everything I needed. Full property rights restored. All damage repairs paid for. Emotional distress acknowledged by the court. Public record of my name cleared. The HOA? Nothing but a memory and a warning. It's strange what lingers. You'd think with him gone, with the fences down, the power restored, and the lawsuits closed, I'd feel whole again. But peace is fragile. I still check over my shoulder when I take out the trash. I still hesitate before opening my door when someone knocks. There's a car parked across the street some days, engine running. No one ever gets out. It's probably nothing. Probably some of my co-workers still look at me sideways. The rumors from the fake debt collectors still haven't fully died down. And that's the part no lawsuit can fix. Reputation is like glass. Once cracked, it never reflects quite the same. But I have my home, my freedom, my truth, and I'll never let anyone take that from me again. People ask if I'd ever live in another HOA-governed neighborhood. I tell them I'd rather live in a tent on the side of a volcano, because once you've seen the monster behind the mask, you never forget the shape of its shadow.